While I was watching TV, my wife asked, "Do you think I'm fat?" It was an ordinary evening, the kind you don't even expect to remember. The TV was on, something light playing in the background, some sitcom rerun with a laugh track that rose and fell like waves. I was sprawled on the sofa, remote in one hand, a half-finished glass of soda on the table. My girlfriend was next to me, legs tucked under herself, scrolling through her phone in that absent-minded way she always did when she was half watching, half daydreaming. Out of nowhere, she turned to me, her face serious in that way that instantly makes your heart skip. "Honey," she said, "do you think I'm fat?" Now, any man who has lived on this planet longer than 20 minutes knows that this is not just a question. This is a minefield, wrapped in silk paper, disguised as something simple. My mind raced, trying to read every possible implication in her tone, but I didn't hesitate. I leaned closer, smiled, and said with all the confidence I could muster, "Of course not. You are perfect." She narrowed her eyes at me like she was studying my answer under a microscope. "Perfect?" she repeated, as if testing the word on her tongue. "Yes," I said, doubling down. "Perfect." For a moment, she said nothing. Then, in that playful but challenging way of hers, she asked, "Then will you carry me to the bedroom?" That was when the shiver ran down my spine. Because it wasn't just about carrying her. It was about proving physically and immediately that my words weren't empty. And in that instant, I imagined myself collapsing halfway up the stairs, her laughter echoing as I wheezed like an old accordion. So I thought fast. And maybe, just maybe, my survival instincts kicked in better than they ever had before. I straightened up, looked her in the eye, and declared with mock heroic grandeur, "To prove how much I love you, today I am bringing the bed into the living room." There was silence for a heartbeat. Then she burst out laughing, a laugh so genuine and uncontrolled it filled the entire apartment. She nearly dropped her phone, covering her mouth with both hands, eyes sparkling with tears of amusement. I grinned, relieved, because I knew I'd turned what could have been a dangerous question into a story we'd both remember. And in that moment, I realized something about us. We survived on humor. We built little bridges out of laughter over the everyday insecurities and the awkward silences. And those bridges, fragile as they seemed, held up surprisingly well. That night, as we kept joking, her teasing me about my great plan to redecorate the entire apartment just to avoid lifting her, me pretending to call a moving company for a bed transport emergency, I knew this was just the beginning. Because one silly question had opened a door to 100 more conversations about who we were, how we saw each other, and how love sometimes hides best in laughter. She was still laughing when I got up from the sofa, pretending to crack my knuckles like a professional mover about to start his shift. "All right," I said with exaggerated seriousness. "Stand back, ma'am. This is going to take some strategy." She rolled onto her side, still giggling, hair falling into her face. "You're not actually going to—" "Oh, but I am," I interrupted, lifting the coffee table a few inches, grunting dramatically and setting it back down. "Step 1, clear the path. Step 2, remove all obstacles. Step 3, successfully transport the royal bed into the Great Hall of Entertainment." She clapped her hands like a kid at the circus, already caught up in the performance. "Well, good luck, Hercules. The bed frame alone weighs more than you and your heroic pride combined." I puffed out my chest and flexed my arm, which wasn't exactly gym sculpted. "Excuse me, these are world-class muscles, built from years of carrying groceries in one trip that set her off again." And her laughter was the kind that makes you laugh too, even when you're trying to keep a straight face. I started moving around the living room, shifting pillows, stacking chairs dramatically like I was clearing a runway. She got up to join in, suddenly very invested in our imaginary project. Wait, you'll never get the bed through the hallway with that lamp in the way," she said, pointing like a foreman. "Do I need to draw you a blueprint?" "Please do," I replied, handing her a notebook from the coffee table. "Architectural plans will greatly increase the efficiency of this mission." So she sat there, cross-legged on the rug, sketching what looked like a kindergarten drawing of a rectangle with arrows pointing toward the living room. She labeled it "The Bed" in huge block letters. When she held it up, she was laughing so hard she could barely breathe. "Flawless," I said, snatching the paper and tucking it under my arm like it was a sacred scroll. "We have our battle plan. Tomorrow we conquer." She leaned back against the sofa, shaking her head. "You are ridiculous." "You knew that when you signed up," I shot back. For a moment, the joking slowed, and she just looked at me. The TV was still running in the background, laugh track echoing, but her eyes were suddenly soft. "You really don't think I'm fat?" she asked again, quieter this time. I sat down beside her, serious now. "No, I think you're you, which is perfect." Her lips curved into the smallest smile, but her eyes told me she wanted to believe it, needed to believe it. I knew she wrestled with her own insecurities. She saw flaws where I saw the person I couldn't imagine life without. And sometimes humor was the way we both reached that truth without the heaviness of too many serious words. So I leaned closer and whispered, "But if you ever really want me to carry you, I will. Even if I drop dead halfway to the bedroom." That finally made her laugh again, but I could see the gratitude behind it. She laid her head on my shoulder, the paper blueprint still crumpled in her hand, and we sat there for a long while. Later, when we went to bed the normal way, she teased me one more time. "You know, if the bed had been in the living room, I wouldn't have had to brush my teeth in the bathroom." And I replied, "Then tomorrow, I'm bringing the sink too." She groaned, half amused, half exasperated, and curled up against me. And that was how our silly little game turned into something more. An evening of laughter that carried us past insecurities and into the strange, funny comfort of knowing we were exactly where we belonged. For a few days after that, I'll bring the bed into the living room incident. We lived as usual, but I noticed her question, am I fat? Wasn't just a joke. Behind her smile and laughter, there was a shadow of doubt. She pretended everything was fine, but sometimes I caught her glance in the mirror. Quick, as if furtive. She would adjust her t-shirt, suck in her stomach, then wave it off and change the subject. I didn't want to push it. I loved her for who she was, and I told her so again and again. But I wanted to show her not just words, but actions. That's how my idea was born. One evening I casually said, I think I'll try going to the gym. My back hurts from sitting, and I'm lacking energy. She raised her eyebrows. You? Going to the gym? So what? I chuckled. I'll be a muscle man and you won't be able to take your eyes off me. She snorted, but I could tell she was interested. The next day, I actually bought a membership and started going. The first workouts were tough. My muscles ached. My breathing was ragged. I felt like a kid in gym class, but I didn't give up. Every time I came home, I deliberately pretended to be exaggeratedly tired. I'd collapse on the couch, groan, and stretch ostentatiously. Oh, this is so hard for me, I'd say, winking. And all just so I can look even cooler for you. She laughed, but the interest in her eyes grew more and more noticeable. Sometimes she'd ask, what were you doing there? Or, is it true that you feel lighter after going to the gym? I'd answer honestly, without pressure, but always add, want to come with me sometime? Just to see. At first, she brushed me off, but a couple of weeks later, when I was getting ready for another workout, she suddenly said, okay, I'll go with you today, but just to watch. I tried not to show my excitement, simply nodding, of course, just to watch. And so we entered the gym. The metallic clang of weights, the smell of rubber and iron, people, some running on the treadmill, some lifting weights. She stood next to me, a little embarrassed, but her eyes darted around curiously. So where are you suffering? She whispered. I'll show you, I replied and went to the machines. She watched me do my sets, grinning at first, then starting to lift the dumbbells herself, just to try. And then, to her surprise, she liked it. At the end of the workout, she looked tired, but her eyes were shining. You know, she said as we walked home, that wasn't so bad. Even nice. I smiled. Be careful, or you'll get used to it. She nudged me in the side. We'll see. That evening, I realized the ice had broken. She took the first step herself, and then new habits, new difficulties, and new funny stories awaited us. Stories that changed us both. We started going together. No big promises, no new life starting Monday. We'd simply pack our gym bags in the evenings, silently check our water bottles, and after a couple of weeks, we developed a small routine. She'd take a little longer to choose her running shoes. I'd joke about waiting for Miss Cardio, and she'd reply that Mr. Deadlift was always late for his big sets. The ice hadn't just broken. For the first time, we were moving in the same direction. Our first workouts together were strange and funny. She didn't trust the machines, and I didn't trust my knees. We tried a little bit of everything. The treadmill, the elliptical, deadlifts with minimal weight, squats with a resistance band. I'd watch her in the mirror to make sure she didn't round her lower back, and she'd watch my form, placing her hand on my chest every time. Breathe. Don't forget to breathe. After 2 laps, we were spread out across the bench, but the tired satisfaction in our eyes was the same. We walked out into the night, steam billowing from our faces, and I found myself already anticipating the next time. At the same time, we carefully adjusted our food. I dragged a small scale into the kitchen and, impersonating a cooking show host, declared the lazy season over. She snorted but began cutting vegetables into beautiful stripes, like in the recipe photos. We agreed not to turn food into a religion. Less sugar, more water, protein at every meal, but without fanaticism. In the evenings, we didn't count calories. We counted honesty. How many times we said, I don't want to, and still did it. Funny, but it worked. Naturally, the dynamite days arrived. Cold rain, the body humming, the brain screaming, let's do it without the gym. One day we sat in the hallway and silently stared at our sneakers for about 3 minutes. Then she quietly said, if you say let's go, I'll get up. I sighed, let's go. We both got up. And then in the locker room, we were laughing at ourselves. Sometimes the hardest thing is tying your shoelaces. And our breakdowns over food were like sitcom plots. One time, I went out to take out the trash and came back with a paper bag that smelled like French fries, as if they'd been fried right there on the court. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed. I wonder what kind of trash this is. I caught myself hiding the bag behind my back, like a teenager. We ended up sitting in the kitchen, splitting the portion in half, loudly discussing how exactly we'd bathe those fries on the road the next day. The next day, she caught herself. I found a chocolate bar wrapper under the sofa cushion. We argued for a long time about how that nasty creature could have even gotten in there. And then we'd laugh until we cried, until we had to look for the remote, which had vanished somewhere in the storm. Sometimes the funny turned poignant. There were evenings when I'd adopt a moralizing tone, and she'd narrow her eyes. Are you a husband or a fitness trainer for food now? One time we had a huge fight. She'd snapped at a friend's pizza, and I'd fallen back on my memorized phrases about consistency. We spent the night with our backs to each other. In the morning, I made coffee and left a note next to it. I love you no matter what. I'm angry not because of the pizza, but because we're alone. She came out of the shower, smeared the ink with her wet fingers, and said, let's agree. We don't eat in secret. If you want, you say so. And if we do eat, we split it 50-50. We shook hands like partners. And suddenly, that seemed more important than all our plans. Gradually, we developed little rituals. Running date, 20 minutes together, each at their own pace, but with a glance over their shoulder. Friday night out, stretching, shower, then tea in the kitchen without a phone, and silly stories from the week. Joy control, not numbers on the scale, but marks like stairs without stopping, jeans buttoned without dancing, easier to wake up in the morning. These check marks warmed us more than any grams. Sometimes the gym rewarded us capriciously. One Tuesday, she, all tousled and disheveled, suddenly did a clean, powerful deadlift. We exchanged glances. A surprised light flashed in her eyes. I whispered, "Look, it's you." She shrugged, but I saw her straighten another centimeter. The next week, I ran a kilometer without stopping for the first time and suddenly realized I wasn't looking for a bench for an emergency landing. She patted me on the back and whispered something like, "Proud." We hoarded those prouds like batteries. There were some comical days, like a chronicle of our attempts to eat right. I once made a healthy dessert of cottage cheese, cocoa, and banana, and served it with a pompous air in small bowls. She tasted it, remained silent, and very politely said, "It's like chocolate that forgot it was chocolate." We laughed, picked at it with our spoons, and then went for apples and cinnamon. It turned out that baked apples give more happiness for the same amount of calories. We learned not to torture ourselves, but to seek out the taste that doesn't turn life into a barracks. And yes, we returned to the jokes that started it all. In the underground parking garage, I'd sometimes take her in my arms for 2 steps, purely for theatrical reasons, and whisper, "Practicing? The bed's getting closer." She'd press her forehead to my shoulder. "The main thing is, don't drop me when you turn." We'd both laugh because we knew that this joke wasn't a lifeboat anymore, but a warm noose we could dive into when the going gets tough. The most unexpected thing, it happened a couple of months later. We stayed in the gym until closing time. The locker room was empty, and in the hallway mirror, I saw the two of us. Not perfect, but a little clearer. She caught my gaze in the reflection and didn't look away. For a second, that old "I'm not like that" disappeared from her eyes. A calm, even I am. And I realized that for that second, all the rainy evenings, all the squabbles over wrappers, and all the heavy knees had been worth it. At home, we laid out the containers with food for tomorrow, set the alarm for the early, "Shall we go?" out of habit, and lay down. She nuzzled me and said almost in a whisper, "You know, you came up with a funny way out back then, on the couch. But now, you've done something real. You chose me, and yourself next to me." I took a deep, slow breath and replied, "And I will choose tomorrow, even if I have to split the fries in half again." We fell asleep to the steady sound of the night, and someone out there in the darkness seemed to be smiling in our direction. We weren't finished yet, not even halfway through, but we were finally running in the same direction. And it seemed like for the first time in a long time, neither of us had a bed in the living room backup plan up our sleeves. It was no longer needed. We were learning not to run away, but to come together. Routines stick like a Band-Aid, then they become like skin. Before we knew it, "Let's not miss it today" turned into, "What time are we leaving?" The alarm clock stopped being an enemy and became like a traffic light. When it lights up, we're off. I started leaving my sneakers by the door, and she'd lay out rubber bands and a heart rate monitor on the table, making it seem like a strange setting for two people who needed a little discipline for dinner. My wife's confidence grew not with a ruler, but like the light at dawn, at first dubiously, then as if it had always been that way. She no longer adjusted her shirt in front of the mirror or sucked in her stomach when she passed store windows. One day I caught her automatically running her fingers along her deltoid, and she smiled, not with anger, but with quiet pride. "Look, it's me," she said wordlessly. We came up with a game called 3 I Don't Want Tos a week. On days when your body aches and your brain is racing, you can honestly say "I don't want to" 3 times, but still go. We stumbled around the 6th week. It turned out that the "I don't want tos" were coming less frequently. Instead, we adopted the "let's keep it short." 20 minutes of cardio, 3 sets of deadlifts, stretching, and then home. And funny enough, these short ones were more effective than long, heroic runs that left us falling apart. Eating also became a team effort. We found a balance between right and lively. Stewed vegetables stopped being a punishment when she added garlic and thyme. Chicken breast took on a new life when I mastered paprika, plus lemon, plus oven. We'd text each other from the store. "Which cottage cheese do you want? Brave or cowardly?" Brave, the kind that won't run away from the plate. Jokes kept us on our toes better than any calorie counting app. Of course, the snagging didn't go away. It just became kinder. One time I walked into the room and saw her standing with her back to me, suspiciously still. "What are we chewing?" I asked cautiously. She turned around with a bagel crumb on her lip and an apologetic smile. It wasn't me. A squirrel came and left evidence. We laughed, then went into the kitchen together and made tea with honey, agreeing that sweets weren't a crime, but an event worth discussing beforehand. Another time, she caught me with a bag of nachos. I tried to hide it behind my back, but the bag rustled treacherously. "Interrogation with displacement," she said, and gave me a funny, questioning, "Name, nachos, place of residence, dash dash movie theater. How tasty are you on a scale from 1 to, let's split it?" We split it, of course. Half and half, our diplomacy. There were also some tough days. She came home from the gym irritated. "I hate these squats. My knees feel like they belong to someone else." I started something about technique and gradualism, and instantly became that coach for food. We slammed shut. I fell silent, sat down next to her and said, "We can skip squats for a week. I need you more than your technique." She rested her forehead on my shoulder and sighed, "Thank you. And let's just do a quick walk tomorrow. No heroics." The next morning we measured our steps, And in the evening, she suddenly said, let's bring back squats, but with a resistance band. I'm ready, and off we went. My favorite metric became unstageable. Not kilograms, not centimeters, moments. She walked up to the 7th floor without stopping. For the first time, I slung my backpack over one shoulder without chuckling. We both noticed that on Sundays after a workout, you don't feel like collapsing, but rather want to walk. While out for a walk, she caught her reflection in a shop window and, instead of the usual, ugh, said, look, I have collarbones. I laughed. They've always been there. We just like to play hide and seek. We became people who kept our word to ourselves and each other. If one of us slipped up, the other wasn't a judge. At most, a witness. So, no excuses tomorrow, we'd say, bumping fists. When one of us didn't want to go, the other wouldn't drag us by the hair, but would offer a deal. 15 minutes of walking, then home, and a movie. And almost always 15 turned into 25, and the movie at home tasted better even without the nachos. Sometimes the world tested us. A friend's birthday party. The table was groaning, glasses clinking. We'd agreed beforehand. We eat what we want, but without autopilot, and we tell each other the truth. On the 3rd slice of cake, I looked at her, she looked at me, and we both simultaneously said, enough. Someone nearby joked that we were cultists. We smiled and poured water. On the way back, she nudged me with her elbow. I didn't think I could just stop and the world wouldn't collapse. I shrugged, because the two of us are holding it together. Another small victory happened in the fitting room. She picked up a pair of jeans a size smaller than her previous safe size, just to try them on. When the zipper went up without a hitch, she suddenly froze and looked at me as if I'd just turned on a lamp. I'm beautiful, she said out loud, as if testing how it sounded. You were beautiful before the jeans, I replied. But now you're also happy. And that's a whole other level. It seemed like we bought more proof than jeans that day. We began to catch ourselves expressing gratitude. She for not turning into a controller, I for not giving in and not comparing us. Ma appeared. Lazy letters. A sticker on the mirror that said, you're strong. A text message that said, I'm proud you went even though it was raining. A note in a container that said, this isn't just chicken. It's yesterday's laziness we ate. It was silly, but it worked better than any motivational speech. And of course, the joke about bringing the bed into the living room never went away. It became our cue. When the day was tough, she'd say, so are we carrying the bed today? I'd reply, no. Today we're carrying each other. And I would. Not always in my arms. More often with words. Walking together. The warmth of my hand. But sometimes, yes, literally, a couple of steps, a laugh, a kiss on the temple. And I realized I no longer needed to make excuses because the strength had returned not to my biceps, but to my intention. At the end of the month, she herself suggested, let's count victories, not calories. We sat down and wrote 10. There were stairs, jeans, hookups without war, 15 minutes turn into 25, a night without guilt, and another one. I look at myself and see myself. She put it last and circled it with a heart. I realized I was ready for the ending of our playful story, which began with the couch. But the ending had to come on its own, without any stage pacing, without any come on, tell me, like in a movie. I waited, unhurried. I carried her bag into the hallway, put a cool pillow under her head, tied her shoelaces when her fingers froze outside. And one evening, the knot itself, ready to untie itself with precision and grace. We returned from the gym late. The entrance hall smelled of fresh paint. The elevator rattled like an old bus. At home, she went to take a shower. I sliced apples with cinnamon, our reconciliation dessert. We sat on the couch, our feet under the blanket, the TV whispering something about other people's lives. She turned to me, narrowed her eyes, and I immediately recognized that look, the same one from the couch when it all began. So, she said quietly, do you think I'm fat? That quiet, yes, right now, clicked in my chest. She asked this quietly, as if she were testing herself, not me. The TV hummed somewhere in the background. The warm scent of cinnamon apples emanated, and the blanket tickled my knees. I looked at her and saw not only the familiar squint, but also everything that had happened between that first I'll bring the bed into the living room and this evening. Morning alarms, 15 minutes and I'm home. Funny nacho interrogations, notes on the mirror. The first kilometer without stopping. Her, I'm beautiful in the fitting room. My proud on the path. That entire journey was summed up in one question, asked with a smile. Do you think I'm fat? She repeated a little louder, but with that same glint in her eyes that had once concealed anxiety and now concealed mischief. I didn't answer right away. I handed her a slice of apple and she bit into it. Without looking away, she added, then maybe you could carry me to bed. Like the legend said, I felt that switch flip inside me. The time had come. No excuses, no cover-up jokes. I placed the bowl on the table, threw off the blanket, stood up, and offered her my hand. Yes, I said. She raised an eyebrow. Yes. What? Yes, I'll carry you to bed, I replied, leaning slightly. And yes, you're perfect. But you already know that she smiled the way people smile when they've won an old game by new rules. I caught her, one hand under her knees, the other under her shoulder blades. Her body responded calmly and confidently, without the old panic of, what if I don't make it? Her legs found their own rhythm, and the hallway seemed shorter than usual. She settled into my arms, rested her forehead against my cheek for a second, and whispered, is it hard? It's easy, I said honestly. You've gotten lighter, and I've gotten stronger. I think that's how it was supposed to be. We passed the mirror in the hallway, and in the reflection, I saw the two of us. Not the heroes of a fitness commercial, but people who had made a deal with themselves and each other. She glanced in the mirror briefly and then back at me, and that look held everything at once: gratitude, a chuckle, and a small test of, "Are you sure you're getting it right?" I nodded wordlessly. In the bedroom, I lowered her onto the edge of the bed so gently, as if it were the final note of some long melody we'd sung. She pulled her legs up, sat there swinging her foot, and looked up at me. The same angle, the same light as that very first evening. Only the air was different, calm. "You know," she said, "I used to think that if I asked, 'Am I fat?' I'd hear what I was afraid of, but now I ask, and I hear what I'm already thinking, that I am me, and that's okay." "That's wonderful," I corrected. She grinned. "Okay, philosopher," she paused, and then again, almost in a whisper, "So have you brought the bed into the living room?" I sat down next to her and touched her shoulder. "No need," I said. "Now you can bring your wife to the bed." She laughed, quietly, tiredly, happily. She lay down on the pillow and tugged at my sleeve. "Come here, Mr. 15 minutes turns into 25. I lay down next to her, and we covered ourselves with a single blanket, which had somehow miraculously migrated from the living room. A couple of minutes later, she was breathing deeper, almost asleep. I stared at the ceiling and thought about how many times we'd circled around this scene. Sometimes with a joke, sometimes with weariness, sometimes with excuses. And how simple it had become now, when instead of, "I'll bring the bed," there was, "I'll bring you." No substitutions, no panic, no drama. Before falling asleep, she suddenly whispered again, as if catching up with what was left. "Thank you for choosing me then. And now, and tomorrow." "Tomorrow especially," I replied. The washing machine timer quietly clicked in the hallway. The city outside the window hummed with its nightlife, and for us, everything had finally fallen into place. The door closed, the lights off, our breathing even. We hadn't become different people. We had become a little more honest and stronger, enough to not drag the bed where it doesn't belong, and enough to carry each other to the right room when it matters. The next evening, she caught my eye in the mirror again, and as if for the record, asked, "So am I fat?" I moved closer, kissed her temple, and replied, "You're the one I always wanted to carry." And we both realized our old joke had worked. From then on, it was just life, with apples and cinnamon, with a sidewalk and 15 minutes, with the occasional nachos that were fairly shared, with that easy yes that, at the right moment, turns into hands, steps, and an open bedroom door.